The deep quiet of the winter forest was a blanket of soft snow and still air. In a small wooden cabin at the edge of the trees, a woman named Anya waited. She sat very still in a chair by her stone fireplace. The orange firelight danced on her face and on the simple Christmas decorations around the room. A single pine wreath hung on the wall. A wool blanket was folded neatly on the sofa. Outside the window, the world was painted blue and white by the moon and the snow. Anya was listening for a sound that no human could ever hear. Anya was a werewolf. This did not mean she was a monster. In her world, werewolves were guardians. They lived by ancient rules. The most important rule was the Christmas Truce. For 12 special days every year, starting on Christmas Eve, all werewolves promised to be peaceful. They would not hunt. They would not fight. They would remember how to be still and quiet and human. This peace was started by a magical bell. When the bell rang, it sent out a pure, clear note that only werewolf ears could find. This sound was not like the jingling sleigh bells people heard in stories. It was a high, steady tone, like a perfect whistle from a silver flute. It was the sound of a promise being kept. Every year, Anya felt a little nervous as she waited. Hearing the bell meant she could truly relax. She could enjoy the quiet joy of the season without the constant feeling of the wild forest calling to the wolf part of her heart. The bell made that call quiet down. It was a gift of peace. As the last bit of sunlight vanished below the hills, she closed her eyes and focused. She listened past the crackle of her fire. She listened past the gentle groan of the old trees outside in the cold. She waited, then it came. The sound pierced the silent night. It was the truce bell. Anya let out a long, slow breath. A feeling of calm warmth spread from her heart to her fingers and toes. The tension in her shoulders melted away. She smiled a small, real smile. The truce had begun. For 12 days, all would be well. She could almost imagine the other werewolves like her, in their own hidden places, hearing the same tone and feeling the same relief. They were all connected by this sound of peace. But then, the sound changed. The clean, clear note twisted. It warped into a harsh, jagged noise. It was like the beautiful flute music was being played on a broken, rusty instrument. The new sound vibrated unpleasantly in Anya's head and made her teeth feel funny. A sour taste filled her mouth. Her calm feeling shattered like thin ice. Her eyes snapped open. She stood up so quickly her chair scraped on the wooden floor. The happy firelight now seemed to make scary, jumping shadows on the walls. The peaceful promise of the bell was broken. The truce was broken. Something was wrong in the world. Something dark had found a way in. Anya wrapped her arms around herself, staring into the dark forest beyond her window. Knowing the silent night was now full of a dangerous, silent threat, the wrong sound of the bell was a cold knot in Anya's stomach. She could not solve this puzzle alone. A broken truce was a danger to everyone, not just her own kind. She moved quickly across her cozy cabin to the old black telephone hanging on the wall. Her hand was steady as she lifted the receiver and dialed a number she knew by heart. It was the direct line to the sheriff's office in the little town of Evergreen. The phone rang in that slow, echoing way that meant the line was traveling through miles of snowy hills. After 3 rings, a man's tired voice answered. Sheriff David North in the background. Anya could hear the faint, tinny sound of a Christmas carol playing on his radio. "David, it's Anya." Her own voice sounded tight and thin to her ears. "Anya, shouldn't you be listening for Santa?" he asked. It was their old joke. A secret code that meant, "Is the truce holding?" "The bells," she said, not bothering with the code tonight. "They are wrong. The sound is broken." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Sheriff David North knew exactly what she meant. He was one of the very few humans who knew the truth about the woods around Evergreen. He knew about the werewolves and their ancient rules. His own great-grandfather had made the first agreement with Anya's family. It was a simple promise. The town would leave the wolves in peace, and the wolves would keep the deeper, older dangers away from the town's borders. David had kept this secret his whole life. Wrong how? He finally asked. His voice was all business now. The tiredness was gone, replaced by the careful calm he used during a crisis. "The truce is broken," Anya explained, her eyes scanning the dark tree line outside her window. "Something has shattered the peace." I think it is using the holiday as a cloak. All the noise and the celebration, the distracted joy. It is the perfect time for a predator to move unnoticed. She could hear him moving, the rustle of thick fabric. She pictured him in his small, warm office, taking his heavy brown coat from its hook and slipping it on over his uniform. "What do you need?" he asked. It was always the question. "Watch the town," she instructed. The big gatherings, the carolers going door to door, the midnight service at the old church. Anywhere people are together, laughing, feeling safe. That happiness might draw this thing like a magnet. "I will take the outskirts, the lonely farms, the empty vacation cabins, the deep woods." Another pause, shorter this time. "All right, I'll make the rounds. I'll tell my deputy there's a weather advisory to keep people indoors if I have to. You be careful, Anya. If the bell is broken, then the old rules are broken too." "I will," she said. "You watch your back as well, David. This is not a normal night." "It never is," he replied, and the line went quiet with a soft click. Anya hung up the telephone. The silence in her cabin felt heavier now. She was not alone in this, but that did not make the danger less. Her friend was walking into his own kind of danger, armed only with a flashlight and his badge. She pulled on her own coat, a thick parka the color of the forest shadows. She laced up her heavy boots and opened her cabin door. A wash of freezing air greeted her. She took one last look at her warm, quiet home, at the fire still dancing in the hearth. Then she stepped out into the December night, closing the door firmly on the warmth behind her. Somewhere out in the glittering darkness, Sheriff David was doing the same thing, leaving his small office to walk the festive, lamplit streets of Evergreen. There were two guardians, one of the human world and one of the wild, separated by snow and shadow but connected by a promise older than both of them. The hunt for what broke the bell had begun. The door of her cabin closed with a solid, final sound. Anya was now part of the frozen night. A sharp wind whispered through the tall pine trees, stirring the powdery snow on their branches. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with air so cold it hurt. Her ordinary human senses were good, but now she let the other part of her wake up. The world did not just open. It exploded into 1,000 clear details. She could hear the tiny scratch of a mouse's claws under 3 feet of snowpack, digging for a frozen seed. She could smell the sweet, sticky sap deep inside a sleeping maple tree 50 yards away. She could feel the vibration of a distant plow truck grinding its way down the county road. Her werewolf senses were a powerful tool, but tonight they felt strange. The broken bell's wrong note was still there, a faint, buzzing hum at the edge of her mind. It was like a smudge on a clean window. It made the world seem fuzzy in the wrong places. The happy noises of the season were the worst. From the distant town, she could hear the joyful chorus of people singing Silent Night, but the sound did not come to her clear and sweet. It was muffled and warped, as if she were hearing it from underwater. Laughter from a family hanging lights in their yard sounded thin and far away, like a bad radio signal. The broken bell was not just a broken promise. It was a distortion, bending the good sounds and magnifying the quiet, scary ones. She had to focus. She was a hunter now, but she was hunting another hunter. What had broken the truce would be a creature that loved shadows and silence. It would avoid the noisy, bright gatherings. It would seek the lonely places. She had a list in her mind, a map of the vulnerable spots in her territory. Her first stop was Old Man Henderson's farm. The house was a dark shape at the end of a long, unplowed lane. Anya moved through the trees, her boots making no sound on the deep snow. She circled the property, her eyes seeing the heat glow of the roof in the cold air. She listened. Inside, she could hear the steady, rumbling snore of Mr. Henderson, fast asleep in his armchair. The television was on, showing a log burning in a fireplace. He was safe. She moved on. Next was the Miller family's house. It was the opposite of lonely. Their yard was a dazzling spectacle of colored lights and glowing plastic reindeer. Music blared from outdoor speakers. Through the windows, Anya could see the blurry shapes of children dancing. She stood in the dark tree line watching. Their joy was a bright, warm bubble. She could smell chocolate and popcorn. Nothing wrong touched this place. The happy chaos here was its own kind of protection. She was glad for it, For over an hour she traveled this way, a silent shadow checking on every isolated home and quiet barn. She found only sleeping dogs, dreaming cows, and people safe in their beds. The wrong feeling in the air grew stronger, a nagging itch between her shoulders, but she found no cause. Then she came to the Silverton Lodge. It was a huge, grand old building from a busier time, now abandoned and falling apart. Its windows were dark eyes. The tall ski lift chairs hung motionless, like frozen skeletons. This place was always quiet, but tonight the quiet felt different. It felt thick and heavy, like a held breath, and there was a smell. It cut through the clean scent of pine and frost. It was a dry, oily smell. It smelled like a closed attic full of old dust and dead moths. It smelled like the cold iron of a forgotten well. And underneath that terrible smell was the sharp, coppery scent of fear. Pure human fear. Anya's heart beat a slow, heavy rhythm in her chest. The distortion in the air was strongest here. The buzzing hum of the broken bells seemed to gather around the lodge's peaked roof. She had found the source of the broken promise. It was not lost. It was here, and it was not alone. The terrible smell pulled Anya forward like a rope. She moved from the shelter of the trees towards the hulking shape of the Silverton Lodge. Her steps were careful and silent. She avoided the creaking front steps and instead slipped around to the side where a window pane was shattered. The jagged glass teeth still clung to the frame. She listened intently, but the only sound from within was the low moan of the wind through empty hallways, and that faint, persistent hum of the broken bell. She crouched and eased herself through the broken window, her coat catching for a moment on the glass. Inside, the air was even colder than the forest, a still and stagnant cold that held no promise of warmth. The grand lobby of the lodge was a cavern of shadows. Moonlight streamed through the high, dirty windows, painting silver stripes on the floor thick with dust and fallen plaster. What she saw in that sickly light made her breath stop. In the center of the room stood a Christmas tree. But it was a nightmare of a tree. It was long dead, its branches bare and skeletal. Someone or something had decorated it. Hung from its brittle limbs were not ornaments, but tarnished forks and knives. Jagged pieces of broken mirror glass twirled on bits of string, catching the moonlight. Rusty bottle caps and bent nails dangled like evil fruit. It was a monument to everything sharp and broken, and before this awful tree, a creature was crouched. It was tall and painfully thin, wrapped in a tattered black coat that seemed to absorb the dim light. Its limbs were too long, bending at wrong angles. Its fingers were not fingers but dark, hardened points like icicles of stone. It was focused on a shape on the floor, a young man in a bright blue winter jacket, curled and trembling. A backpack was spilled open nearby. The creature held a crude iron bell in one hand, not ringing it, just clutching it. As Anya's foot brushed a piece of debris, the creature turned. It had no face. Where a face should have been was a smooth, polished curve of black obsidian. It was like a dark mirror. In its surface, Anya saw a distorted reflection of the monstrous tree, the moonlit room, and her own stunned face, pale and wide-eyed. There were no eyes to look into, no mouth to speak. Yet it saw her, and it spoke. The voice did not come from a mouth. It simply formed in the air around her. A dry, grinding sound like stones being crushed deep under frozen earth. "The bells are so loud for them," it said. The shape on the floor, the backpacker whimpered. "So merry. They fill their ears with cheer. They do not hear the change. They do not hear the quiet spaces in between the notes, the silent places where old things can walk again." The creature stood to its full, towering height. It was called a Krampus, but this was no storybook beast. This was something ancient. A predator that did not hunt flesh, but feelings. It fed on hope and joy, leaving behind a hollow, frozen despair. "Your truce," the grinding voice continued. It created such a delicate, perfect silence. A blanket of peace, so easy to snap, so easy to tear. It tilted its mirror face, and Anya saw her own wolf form reflected back at her, twisted and angry. "I broke your little bell. Now the real music of the season can play. The music of fear in the quiet dark." Anya understood now. The creature had not come by accident. It had hunted for the one sound that kept its kind at bay, the pure note of the truce. It had shattered that sound on purpose. The happy noise of Christmas, the distractions and celebrations, were not just a cover. They were the very thing that muffled the world's hearing, allowing this thief of joy to slip in unseen and feast. It was here for the backpacker's hope, and it would move on to the town next, leaving a trail of empty, joyless people behind. The truce was not just broken, it had been invaded. The Krampus's words hung in the frigid air, a poison that felt colder than the winter night. Anya did not answer with her own voice. She answered with a snarl that started deep in her chest and erupted into the dusty silence of the lodge. The change took her then. It was not a choice but a necessity. A surge of power that was both agony and relief. Her bones made soft, popping sounds as they reshaped themselves. Muscles grew and tightened under her skin. A thick pelt of silver, gray fur burst from her pores, covering her body in a warm, protective layer. Her hands became powerful paws tipped with black claws. Her face lengthened into a muzzle filled with sharp teeth. In seconds, the woman was gone, and in her place stood a large, formidable wolf, her amber eyes fixed on the faceless creature. The Krampus was not surprised. It moved, but not like any animal Anya had ever fought. Its movements were jerky and swift, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. It did not lunge with teeth or claw. Instead, it swung its long, thin arm. The crude iron bell in its hand became a weapon, whistling through the air as a bludgeon. Anya leaped to the side. The bell missed her head but clipped her shoulder. The touch was not just a physical blow. A wave of intense, sickening cold shot through her body, followed by a cascade of whispers that were not sounds but feelings planted directly into her mind. "You are a monster," the whispers hissed. "Look at yourself, all fang and fury. The woman by the fire is a lie. You are only this beast. You belong in the dark, not in their world of light and bells." She shook her massive head, trying to dislodge the thoughts. She swiped a heavy paw at the Krampus's legs. Her claws screeched across the hard obsidian shell of its shin, throwing bright sparks into the gloom but leaving no mark. The creature was like stone. It swung the bell again. This time, the iron clapper struck her rib cage. A deafening, silent ring of pure dissonance exploded through her. It was the sound of the broken truce, magnified 1,000 times. Pain, both physical and mental, paralyzed her. She stumbled, a whine escaping her throat. The psychic whispers grew louder, colder. "They would scream if they saw you." The voice of the Krampus echoed inside her skull. "The sheriff uses you, but he fears you. The children in town would have nightmares. You protect those who would drive you away with torches and fear. Your truce is a fairy tale. Your peace is a lie." Anya fell to the dusty floor. The freezing doubt seeped into her bones, making her feel heavy and weak. The reflection in the Krampus's mirror face showed her a wounded, snarling animal, alone and monstrous. She began to believe it. What was the point of fighting for a world where she could never truly belong? Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement. The young backpacker on the floor was still alive. He was trying to crawl away, his movements slow with terror. His breath came in shallow, frightened hitches. He was just a kid. He had wanted to see the northern lights. He did not deserve this frozen nightmare. He did not deserve to have his hope stolen, to be left an empty shell. That small, human struggle cut through the static of despair. The boy's fear was real, but so was his will to live. Anya thought not of the whispers, but of other human things. She thought of Sheriff David's tired eyes and his nod of trust. She thought of the Miller children's laughter, a sound she listened for every Christmas Eve, a sound she protected. She remembered the sacred, simple feeling of the truce, of hot cocoa in her quiet cabin, of the first clear note of the bell that meant peace. She was not just a wolf on the floor. She was also the woman by the fire. She was the guardian of the promise. She had two hearts inside her, one that ran with the wild wind and one that cherished the quiet hearth. And both of them beat for the same purpose, to protect. With a roar that shook dust from the ancient rafters, Anya pushed herself up from the floor. The cold whispers cracked like thin ice. Her amber eyes blazed with a new light. Not just animal fury, but a fierce and loving will. She was both, and she would not let this thief of joy win. The Krampus tilted its mirror face, a silent question in its horrible stillness. It expected her to cower again. It expected the whispers to win. Instead, Anya planted her powerful paws firmly on the dusty floor. She filled her lungs with the cold, stale air and let out a howl. This was no sound of pain or defeat. It was a declaration. It was the sound of the forest itself pushing back against the silence, a deep, resonant cry that made the dead Christmas tree shiver and the broken window glass hum. She did not charge the creature's unbreakable chest. She remembered the source of the distortion, the thing that had shattered her peace. Her amber eyes locked onto the long, bony wrist that held the crude iron bell. The Krampus saw her target and swung the bell in a wide, punishing arc to meet her. Anya did not dodge. She moved with the speed of a striking hawk. She surged forward, her body low to the ground, and then sprang upward. Her jaws, capable of snapping a thick tree branch, opened wide. As the iron bell whistled past her ear, she clamped her teeth down on the Krampus's wrist with all her strength. There was a sound like mountains cracking. A web of fractures exploded across the dark, polished obsidian of the creature's arm. It was not a sound of breaking bone, but of breaking magic. A substance like frozen, black tar seeped from the cracks. The Krampus shrieked. This was not a grinding stone voice but a piercing, alien sound of true pain that shattered the remaining panes of glass in the high windows. Shards rained down like icy tears. Its fingers sprang open. The iron bell fell from its grasp. It hit the rotten floorboards with a dull, final thud. The effect was instantaneous. The awful, buzzing dissonance that had filled the lodge, the twisted version of the truce bell, simply ceased. It was as if a constant, painful pressure in Anya's ears had suddenly popped. A pure and total silence rushed in to fill the space, clean and sharp as the winter air outside. It was the first true silence she had heard since the sun went down. The Krampus reeled back, clutching its shattered wrist. It seemed confused, unmoored without its weapon of sound. This was her moment. Anya gathered the last of her strength and swiped a massive paw in a sweeping blow, and not to maim, but to destroy. Her claws connected with the smooth, mirrored surface of its face. The obsidian did not shatter into pieces. It splintered, like ice on a deep lake giving way. But there was no head beneath it. There was no flesh or bone. Behind the breaking face was a swirling vortex of absolute blackness, a howling gale of winter wind and empty despair. The Krampus made no more sound. It stumbled backwards, its form unraveling like old cloth, being pulled into the void behind its broken mask. The tattered black coat fluttered and dissolved. The long limbs folded in on themselves. With a final, sighing rush of air that smelled of coal dust and forgotten places, the creature was gone. The crack in the world sealed itself. On the floor, the iron bell trembled. A thick red rust bloomed across its surface in fast motion, eating the metal away in seconds until nothing remained but a small pile of orange dust. Then even the dust was gone, carried away by a draft that felt suddenly clean. Anya stood panting in the center of the room. The change back to her human form was slower this time, a retreat of power that left her aching and cold. She knelt on the floor, her ordinary hands braced against the dust, her shoulder throbbing where the bell had struck her. The terrible, oily taste was fading from her mouth, replaced by the simple, dry taste of old wood and snow. She looked up. The backpacker was staring at her, his eyes huge in his pale face. He had seen everything. The wolf, the monster, the void. He was shaking. Anya pushed herself to her feet, her body protesting. She walked slowly toward him, holding her hands out to show she meant no harm. She knelt again, a safe distance away. "Hey," she said, her voice a rough scrape in the new quiet. "It is over. It is gone. You are okay." The young man blinked, swallowing hard. He looked from her face to the spot where the Krampus had vanished. "To the bells," he stammered, his voice trembling. "Earlier, in the woods, I heard them change. I thought I was going crazy." Anya offered him a small, tired smile. It was a real smile. "You're not crazy," she said gently. "You heard true. Now, come on. Let us get you out of this cold place. It is Christmas." The walk out of the old lodge felt like walking out of a terrible dream. Anya helped the young man, whose name was Leo, to his feet. He leaned on her slightly, his legs still unsteady from fear. Together they shuffled through the grand, empty lobby, past the awful skeletal tree with its hateful decorations. The moonlight through the broken windows now seemed clean and kind, simply illuminating dust motes dancing in still air. The oppressive rawness was gone, leaving only the quiet chill of an abandoned building. They stepped through the gap where a door once hung and into the embrace of the true winter night. The cold air was a shock, but it was a clean shock, scented only of pine and frozen snow. Leo took a deep, shuddering breath, the first full breath he had taken in what felt like hours. Above them, the sky was an endless black velvet blanket pierced by a million sharp white stars. It was breathtakingly beautiful. As they began the slow trudge through the snow towards the main road, a new sound bloomed at the very edge of hearing. Leo stopped, tilting his head. A look of wonder washed over his pale face. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Anya listened. To Leo, it was the merry, distant jingling of sleigh bells, a cheerful chorus ringing across the starry expanse, the very sound of Christmas magic. He smiled, a real smile that chased the last shadows from his eyes, but Anya heard something else, something even better. It was a single, clear, high note. It was pure and steady and strong. It rang through the frozen air not with jingling merriment, but with unbreakable promise. The true truce bell. Its sound was healed. The peace had been restored, the ancient pact stitched back together by her victory. The sound washed over her, through her, melting the last of the ache in her bones and the cold doubt in her heart. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever known. They reached a plowed county road just as Sheriff David's cruiser pulled up, its red and blue lights painting the snow in silent, swirling celebration. David got out, his boots crunching on the icy pavement. He looked first at Leo, taking in the boy's shaken but alert expression. Then his eyes found Anya standing just at the edge of the tree line. He gave her a long, slow look, from her tired face to her torn coat. He saw the story there, the struggle and the triumph. He did not speak. He simply nodded once, a deep, respectful gesture that held a world of thanks and understanding. "Come on, son," David said to Leo, his voice gentle but firm. "Let's get you warmed up." He guided the young man to the passenger seat of the warm car, handing him a thermos of sweet hot chocolate from the front seat. Leo took it with grateful hands, already telling David in a rush about getting lost, about the strange bells, about the old lodge. David listened, nodding, his eyes glancing once more towards the woods. Anya was already gone, a shadow retreating into the deeper shadow of the trees. Her job was done. The human world could take care of its own now. Anya walked back through the silent forest towards her cabin. The night was no longer a thing to fear. It was a companion. The gentle crunch of snow under her boots was the only sound. As she walked, the clouds drifted, and a few perfect, fluffy snowflakes began to fall. They caught the starlight as they spiraled down, landing soundlessly on the branches and on her hair. She could not hear the jingling bells of Santa's sleigh, but she could hear the truce. It was a sound woven into the silence itself, a frequency of peace that held the wilderness calm. It was the sound of a promise kept, of a balance protected. It was the sound of home. She reached her cabin. The fire in the hearth had burned down to glowing red embers, but the room was still warm. She hung her coat, toed off her boots, and stood for a long moment in the center of the quiet room. The wreath on the wall, the folded blanket, the chair by the hearth. It was simple. It was hers. She was both the woman who lived here and the wolf who guarded its peace. She stoked the fire, added a small log, and watched the flames lick back to life. Then she sat in her chair, wrapped herself in the wool blanket, and listened. She listened to the deep, holy quiet of a world restored. The hunt was over. The truce held. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering every track, healing every scar, dressing the world in a fresh, peaceful white for Christmas morning. The end.